The city glowed like a field of golden fireflies against the December sky. CEO in the country and the loneliest man in the tallest glass tower. It all looked like a silent movie he wasn't part of. Snow tapped against the windows of his 42nd floor office as if reminding him that Christmas Eve had arrived. Yet he didn't look up from his files. The world outside was laughing, celebrating, hugging, singing, wrapping gifts, burning marshmallows, but Alexander remained frozen inside the empty kingdom he had built with his own hands. The office smelled of cold paper and weak coffee, and the only sound was the dull hum of the heating system. Everyone had gone home hours ago. Even the security guard downstairs left a small chocolate, Santa on his desk with a note. "Sir, please take a break tonight." But Alexander didn't break. He never did. Not for birthdays, not for family dinners, not even for the Christmas traditions his late mother fought so hard to keep alive. Work was the only rhythm he knew, the only warmth he trusted, the only thing that didn't leave. He leaned back in his leather chair and stared at the ceiling. Outside, fireworks glimmered in the distance. People down the street were carrying cakes, gifts, sparkling drinks. A group of children passed the building, pulling their sleds and singing carols. Their voices rose like silver bells and seeped faintly into the silent room through the glass walls. For a moment, Alexander felt a sting in his chest, a small, painful reminder that there was once a time when he used to sing too, when Christmas meant something other than quarterly reports and lost sleep. But that time was buried under layers of success, loneliness, and heartbreak. When his mother died 5 years ago, Christmas died with her, and tonight the world seemed perfectly fine without him. At 11:47 p.m., he finally shut his laptop. More out of exhaustion than decision, he put on his coat and stepped into the empty hallway where the lights flickered automatically with his movement. His footsteps echoed like they belonged to a ghost. When he exited the building, the cold slapped his face so sharply that he exhaled in surprise. Snow was falling in slow, magical spirals, thick, soft flakes that stuck to his coat and hair. He stood there for a moment, watching warm families move together across the street like constellations, each person connected to someone else. He had no one to call, no one waiting at home, no one to tell him Merry Christmas. He began walking toward the parking lot when he heard a tiny voice behind him. A voice so soft, so bright, that it cut through the empty night like a candle in darkness. "Excuse me, mister?" Alexander turned. There, half buried in snow, wearing a bright pink jacket with 2 fluffy pom-poms, stood a little girl no older than 7. She held a small paper bag in her hands and her nose was red from the cold. But she was smiling, an unfiltered, pure, fearless smile that children are born with and adults forget. "Are you okay?" he asked awkwardly. She nodded eagerly. "I'm fine, but you look sad." He blinked. "Sad?" "Yes," she said, taking a step closer. "Everyone is going home, but you were walking like someone who lost Christmas." The words hit him harder than he expected. He swallowed. "Something like that." The girl looked at him for a moment, her eyes big and full of a softness he hadn't felt in years. Then suddenly she stretched the paper bag toward him. "This is for you." "What is it?" "A cookie. I baked it with my mom. We're having a Christmas party at our house. You can come if you want. We have hot chocolate, music, lights, and nobody should be alone on Christmas Eve." Alexander froze. People didn't invite him to things. People didn't give him homemade cookies. People definitely didn't look at him with such innocent sincerity. He opened his mouth to decline, the normal, polite, distant way he always rejected anything emotional. But something about the girl stopped him. Maybe it was the way she held her breath, waiting hopefully. Maybe it was the coldness in his chest begging for warmth. Or maybe it was simply time to stop being the man who watched life from behind glass. "What's your name?" he whispered. "Lila," she chirped. "And my mom says I can invite anyone I like. So I invite you." The snow fell heavier around them, covering the street like powdered sugar. Alexander felt something melt inside him, slowly, strangely, painfully. He took a breath, and for the first time in years he said, "Okay, Lila, lead the way." Hand in hand with the smallest person he had ever met, Alexander followed her through the snow toward a warm, glowing house at the end of the block without realizing that this single choice, this single step would change his entire life forever. Lila's house looked like it belonged in a Christmas movie, gold lights dripping from the roof, wreaths hanging on the windows, soft music floating out from inside. As they approached, Alexander saw silhouettes dancing, laughing, hugging. The warmth of the home spilled onto the snow like liquid gold. When Lila opened the door, a wave of heat, cinnamon, laughter, and life hit him all at once. People turned to look at him, surprised but welcoming. They were ordinary people with real smiles, the kind that made his chest ache because he had forgotten what genuine warmth felt like. Lila tugged him inside proudly and shouted, "Mom, I brought someone." A woman in her 30s, flower on her cheek, wearing a red sweater and a heart-melting smile, hurried forward. Her eyes widened when she saw the sharply dressed stranger towering in her doorway. "I hope she didn't bother you," she said, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "She likes rescuing lonely people." Lila hugged her mother's leg and whispered loudly, "He was lonely." Alexander chuckled softly. It felt strange, like dusting off a part of him he hadn't used in years. The woman extended her hand. "I'm Emily." "Alexander," he replied. "Welcome to our chaos," she smiled. "Please make yourself at home." Home, a word he hadn't heard in any meaningful way for far too long. The night moved like magic around him. He watched families exchange small, thoughtful gifts. He tasted Emily's homemade hot chocolate, rich, sweet, comforting. He listened to the laughter of strangers who didn't treat him like a CEO or a headline, but simply a person. Someone handed him a silly red Santa hat, and Lila insisted on putting it on his head herself, giggling every time it slipped sideways. Someone else dragged him into a group photo. Another handed him a gingerbread cookie shaped like a crooked star, and slowly, piece by piece, the ice around his heart began to crack. Emily eventually joined him by the window, where he stood watching snowflakes stick to the glass. "Lila said you were walking alone," she said softly. He nodded. "I've been alone for a while." Her expression softened with a kindness he didn't know how to accept. "You don't have to stay that way," she said. "Sometimes life brings people into our path for a reason." He looked at her. She looked back without fear. A warmth bloomed in his chest, fragile but real. Midnight arrived with fireworks and cheers. Everyone hugged each other, even him. And when Lila wrapped her tiny arms around his waist and whispered, "Merry Christmas," Alexander felt something inside him finally break, not in pain, but in release. He had spent years locked away in glass towers, conference rooms, and silent apartments. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, he felt human. He felt seen. He felt chosen. And as he looked around at the glowing room, the smiling faces, and the little girl who saved him from a lonely night, he realized something profound. Sometimes family is not the one you are born into. It's the one waiting at the end of a snowy street behind a warm door, with a cookie in hand and an invitation to belong. Alexander stayed long after the fireworks ended. And when he finally walked home with a cookie box from Emily, a handmade card from Lila, and a heart that no longer felt empty, he whispered into the quiet night,